you need to all wake up. Can you? No. When I stopped being afraid of the pain, life changed. There really is no death. I came out of my body. Life will go on, but humans have forgotten. And animals reincarnate faster than human beings do. God put all the evil on this planet. He took it from all over the universe, put it here. We have 52 races of beings that come to visit this world. We call them alien. They call our world the zoo of the universe, because there's so many species here. And they overdosed me. It was on fentanyl. And this time, I think they did it on purpose. She purposely pushed the plane down. And before he got me, I got him. That's how things work. I finished it up. I'm not going to tell anybody who it is, because you don't want to go back there. I had 6 mothers and 42 sisters pushing my body into the morgue. And I'd been kicked out of a hospital because of that term.
Welcome, everyone, to Our Sliver of Time. Today we have Dr. Scott Robinson, who is also the author of There Are No Lines in Heaven. We will have all of his information in the description. But first and foremost, thank you so much, Scott, for being here. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to be here on Father's Day, a special day. You might say it's auspicious.
Auspicious. I've never heard that word before.
Having awe and enjoying the attitude of gratitude, being just, it's outstanding day. Like we have the Matterhorn behind me in the video. It's just awesome.
It's always an awesome day when I have you here on the show, so thank you so much for coming here. Dr. Robinson, if you don't mind, I understand you've had not one but 2 near-death experiences, including waking up in a morgue. Now, I hate to start off with such a captivating way to put it, but would you mind kind of just jumping into how these near-death experiences happened in the first place? And then, of course, afterwards, I'm going to pick your brain about all of it.
Sure. The first near-death experience occurred when I was 17 years old. My dad, who was a car dealer both in the Bronx and in Connecticut, near where you live, had bought me a used car. And I got invited to go to Lake Hopatcon, which sits on the border of New Jersey and New York. And I was going to take my new used car, a 68 Mercury Montego, all the way up there with my friend Lou so we could go fishing, because I had never gone fishing. I remember picking Lou up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And as we got onto Route 80, heading west so I could pick up the road going north to Lake Hopatcon, I had a strange feeling. I looked down and I could see through my hands. And I said to myself, gee, if this is death, there's nothing to worry about. I felt wonderful. Somehow, I managed to drive the next 23 miles and have no memory. And all I recall was waking up in the passenger side briefly, wondering where the heck I am with the worst headache. The door opens up, I fall out, and my head hits the boot of a New Jersey Super Trooper, a state patrol officer. And I knew it was them because they had a specific, unique pants with a stripe on it. Sort of looked like Sunoco, but it also looked like the Marine Corps. And I landed on the patent leather boot of this man. And I heard, my last words that I heard were, he's DOA. In between, I had no idea what happened, but I left my body, went down a tube, speeding down, like if you were in the back seat of a car racing at 100 miles an hour, things just flashing by. And I end up at what people would call the gates of heaven, where my grandfather met me. Now, my grandfather had already died a few years before I was born. I was named for him. And my grandfather appeared and said, it's not your time. You don't belong. You have to go back. But before you return, I have someone for you to meet. And he brought me into a little room with 3 beings, one with their back to me, the other 2 facing me from the other side of that wall, whatever that wall was. And he turned around and I said, are you the being everybody calls Jesus? And he said, I am called by many names, but because of your heritage, I will call you the Little Prince of Peace, and you can call me Big Brother. If you ever need me, call upon me and I will be there for you. But meanwhile, I have to send you back. It's not your time to be here yet. And with that, I went, ah, shoot. And I hit my right hand onto my left palm. And the next thing I knew, I was being drawn back into my body. At that very moment in time, my mother and father had arrived at the hospital there. And my mom had said, because she was an intuitive herself, born on Halloween, she said to my dad, let's not go into the emergency room. I have a feeling, go around to the back of the hospital where the morgue was, because they didn't say where to come identify my body. The police just said, your son was in an accident, come identify his body. So mom and dad drove around to the back. They opened up the morgue door. They went down the hall and they saw a body being wheeled into the refrigeration unit. It was covered up, so they didn't know who it was. And the man that was pushing it, they thought it was an intern, suddenly vanished as they got close. And because it was a dark hallway, they figured he must have just stepped away from pushing my body and they didn't see where he went. So they went over to this body and they pulled the sheet back. And just at the same time that I was doing this, being drawn back into my body, they were pulling the sheet back. And I sat up and I said, Mom, Dad, I met Grandpa, I met God. And then my dad said, Son, you had an accident. You hit your head. Come with us. And I went to get up and I went, oh man, do I have the worst headache? And so mom took one arm and dad took the other. They helped me hop off this metal gurney and they walked me down this long hallway and out a set of double doors into the back seat of my dad's Jetta. That was a Volkswagen because he worked for them. He always had a Volkswagen with him. I laid back in that seat down because I couldn't sit up. And I was like, oh man. The next day, they contacted Montefiore Hospital because my dad worked in the Bronx near Montefiore. And they took me to a neurologist and a man named Barry Ludwig, who would later move to California. And Dr. Ludwig said to me, I don't know what happened to you. We can't explain it. Your EEG and your EKG are off. Your DMT levels are way off the charts. DMT is dimethyltryptamine. It does indicate, according to the National Institutes of Health, a person if they've really had a near-death experience. Well, in these days, near-death experiences were just being written about and explained. Raymond Moody, who was one of my mentors as well in the future, he had written the book Life After Life, and he gave me that book along with my mom and said, I think you better read this book. It might apply to you. They would give me Rorschach tests and all sorts of other things. And they noticed that I had strange gifts and abilities to know things, premonitions and other things like that. And they couldn't explain it. So Doc said, look, I got to move. I'm going to California, but I want you to keep in touch. Let us know what's happening. And then Montefiore accidentally lost my records. So I had no records to deal with. Later on, they would call me and find my records years later behind a filing cabinet. But by those times, I'd lost track with the organization. So I didn't know what happened to the records at all.
My understanding was that they lost your records on the second near-death experience too. Was that
Yeah, they
so
lost.
this happened twice?
It happened twice. They kept losing my records everywhere I went. I'm like, why are you keep losing my records? That's the only evidence I have of anything you've told me, right?
Well,
Because
it's
this
in
is new to the world, and near-death experience is not a common term anymore. Not common term yet. So,
yeah.
yeah, they had a habit of losing my records. They would lose my records the second time, and this time I think they did it on purpose. The first time I think the records, they would call me up and tell me that the records were found behind an old filing cabinet. How it got there, I don't know. But the second time I think they lost my records on purpose because they had just claimed to have made a mistake. And I said, you realize you're talking to a medical examiner? So I think that's why they lost the records the second time.
I just wanted to clarify because I didn't know that they lost the records the first time. First time almost sounds like, dare I say, negligence a little bit. Like, how does it end up behind a filing cat? Like, that's just
Somebody pushed a file, put it on top of a cabinet, didn't know, whoever was putting around the records, maybe they moved the file a little bit, something fell and it slipped down there. They wouldn't find it for years. But by the time they found it, I wasn't there. I couldn't respond to it. I think I was in college or something. And because I didn't respond in time, they destroyed the file. So I was like, oh, my only evidence.
That's insane. Before we get into your second near-death experience, I do have one question about, you said that you came back with, I don't want to misquote you here, but you said you had some sort of gifts or other abilities. Do you
I
believe
had gifts and abilities. Some of them were already there before the near-death experience, but they became stronger after that. For instance, I had this divine insight about how to gamble, but I couldn't gamble for me. I had that as a kid, and it was my way of becoming popular, especially in high school. Was I would tell people the point spread and who to bet on. And as a matter of fact, I had a math examination and I would show people how to do this, but God told me I wasn't allowed to bet for myself. So I figured people would give me some money, I'd become popular, they'd give me some money, but they didn't give me any money. I became popular for the wrong reasons. And I just said, the heck with this. I'm doing all this work and you're not giving me anything. Adios, muchachos. Yeah.
we experience life, it seems like through a filter, right? We don't see 100% of the light spectrum and this type of stuff. Do you feel as though maybe having this experience kind of lifted some of that filter off?
Definitely, especially after two. The first one took away the filter on one regard, and the second time it took it off and it like blew it out. The filter was gone. If you knew me when I was a kid, I was kind of shy, kind of quiet. I'm not shy and I'm not quiet. And I don't really care what people think about me in many ways or respects. I know I have a mission and purpose in life, and I'm just going to do it. You don't like me? Get out of my face. You don't like me? Get away from me. But, and if you don't believe me, too bad. So sad. That's your life. You'll figure it out next lifetime. But in this particular regard, those that like me, like me. It's an instantaneous. They either love me or they don't. And I've had people say some really nasty things. And on other times, there's just like, wow, you're the answer I've been looking for, I've been waiting for. So it's one of those things about having one of these experiences, or in my case, twice. And it's all built in to the process of coming from the other side. You're pre-programmed from the other side. And then this happens. So not everybody can have a near-death experience. You have to have this pre-programmed from our heavenly factory before they put you together and send you to Earth.
My understanding is that you had a second near-death experience. You were on a plane when this happened?
It began at in an airplane. All right. What happened was I would go on years later. This is about 18 years from the first near-death experience. I had gone on, became a chiropractor, then I became a medical examiner for the state of California. And even though I had gone to become a court doctor, and barring any changes that the AMA had done, so chiropractors couldn't participate as agreed medical examiners, we had to become qualified medical evaluators and then medical expert witnesses. They changed the laws. I was still working for the state, and I would get a call from an insurance company and or a judge, and they'd say, please go track this patient down and go do an exam and then show up to court. Tell us what you find. One of the things that I had learned to do is I went back and learned how to fly. I had already started flying when I was 15 years old. I was flying gliders. My dad was a pilot in the Air Force. So I always wanted to be like my dad and be a pilot. And because the first near-death experience did not allow me the opportunity to go into the Navy like I was planning, after they had heard I had a near-death experience, they said, I'm sorry, we can't take you now. So what had happened was I went and became a private pilot. I went back, did Civil Air Patrol, learned to be a pilot, and then got paid by the state of California to go fly, track down a person, do my exams, hop back on my airplane, fly back home. And one of these times, it was winter time, like you saw the snow behind me in the photographs. I wanted to go practice with my flight instructor because every week I was always flying with a flight instructor to get more time. I was doing retractable landing gear aircraft, a C-24R, which was a Beechcraft baby bonanza, they used to call it, but it was a Sierra. And they were heavier because the retractable landing gear had equipment. So I wanted to make sure that I was always good on my landing gears, takeoffs, and landings, and making sure that I could go on all weather terrain, anything. So I practiced out of Lake Arrowhead in the Big Bear Mountain areas because I wanted high altitude flight training in the wintertime. It's a different kind of flight. So that particular time, we came off the runway and I went up to 12,000 feet and I got really lightheaded and I slumped over the yoke and almost pushed the plane down. But my instructor, she purposely pushed the plane down. We went down to about almost 8,000 feet so that I could regain consciousness. And she said, "What happened?" I said, "I don't know. I'm feeling really strange." So she got me down on the ground. I got in my car. I actually had to have a California Highway Patrolman follow me because I could not. I didn't have far to go, but I couldn't drive properly. I would get dizzy and had to pull over. And the police officer knew that I had a sticker in the window that identified me that I worked with the police departments. So what happened was he followed me home. I went to see my medical examiner because I had to go for my medical exam anyway. Pilots have to have an annual flight exam. And he found that I was bleeding internally. I was severely anemic. And he sent me to the Keck Institute at USC Medical Center there in Los Angeles. For those folks that don't know, if they've ever watched Guiding Light and General Hospital, some soap operas, they use the front of the hospital for General Hospital. And that's where I went, what they would call General Hospital. And when I was there at the Keck Institute, they found that I had a shadow on my kidney. And they said, "We don't know what this is, but we're kind of concerned. We think it's this diagnosis." I won't get into the diagnosis. And they said, "We want you to start taking therapy right immediately. Otherwise, we don't really think you have long to live." And I said, "I'm sorry, if I take that therapy that you're recommending, I know I won't have long to live." I said, "I've heard with people with similar diagnosis and prognosis that they've gone to Mexico and have had helps and healings." I said, "I'm going to take that option and I'm going to either do it on my terms and live, or I'm going to die, but I'm going to die the way I want to go, not the way you want me to go." So I went across the border to Mexico, worked with Holder Clark, Cure for All Diseases, and I worked with the Gerson Institute. I stayed primarily with the Gerson Institute, did coffee enemas, I did the juicing, raw food. Basically, the only cooked food that I had was basically these potatoes, and every now and then that was my protein for a while. I lost a lot of weight, but when I came back in 3 months to go get my checkup again at the Keck, they said, "Oh, we can't find anything wrong. We must have made a mistake." And I said, "You do realize you are talking to a former medical examiner?" And they went, "Uh-huh." My file disappeared. That doctor retired. Another doctor died. And the third doctor still gave me a hard time, but he was too tall for me to step up to the plate and punch him in the jaw because he was 7 feet tall. All I could reach was his elbow if I was lucky. And I had to go outside because he didn't believe in alternative anything. And he was kind of, "This is my thing, and you only get healed if you do it this way." And I said, "No, I'm not going to do it your way." I walked out, did a prayer, and I said, "I can't work with these people ever again." I moved on. And in the meantime, I had all these other things happening to my physical body, of which I was having a physically hard time functioning. I mean, from number one issue and number two issue, from the first near-death experience. And then the second near-death experience actually occurred when I was on the operating table. And they went in to find out what was going on. That's how they came up with that diagnosis from the Keck. And they overdosed me. It was on fentanyl. And this was a time that Michael Jackson had died from an OD of fentanyl. Well, they used fentanyl to put you to sleep. It was a form of coverage so that you could go to sleep. It was anesthetic and combination. It was those things that would put you into a sleep so they could do their job and you'd wake up. Well, I came out of my body and I floated above and I said, oh, my body's a mess. And an angel appeared next to me and I didn't know who he was. And I said, can I go home now? And they said, no, you still haven't fulfilled your purpose and missions in life. You still have to go back. But this time we're going to tell you, you're going to learn a simple technique to heal yourself and share that with other people. And I would go investigate that. I formed a nonprofit group and I started to investigate all the different types of alternative and spiritual healing that I could. And eventually I would investigate 425 different alternative and spiritual healing techniques until one day in 2007, an angel appeared the day after my birthday and said, now is the time you will learn that technique and you will heal and then share that with other people. And that technique was Einstellen, Einstellen. Einstellen. It's a German word, which means tuning into the source and asking for help and healing. Well, when that angel appeared in November of 2007, I said, okay, well, when's the person going to show up or how am I going to know or anything? And they said, just wait. About a month later, the day after Christmas, a woman called me who had been part of my nonprofit group and said God told her to tell me that I was to use this technique, this Einstein. So she gave me a booklet. And I said, you realize I was told a month ago, what took you so long to get to me? And we laughed. And I read the book. And in 3 days, I had my first of 4 healings would occur. And every week I would have another help and healing. I said, at this rate, dear God, I will be completely healed in a year. And then I heard, just wait, stop. You've got a lot of work to do. Clearing up emotions, doing forgiveness things, a whole slew of things that I had to learn before God would allow me to go back and help other people. I had to be the patient and I had to have patience with the C and no longer be the patient with the T in order to get my job done. So lo and behold, it would take me about 8 years before I could get up and function properly and start to really walk and move. And I remember in 2009, around my birthday again, I began having intense pain, extreme pain. Later, though, I would find out the word is Regulungen or spiritual detoxification. And I asked my mom and dad, would you please drive me to the MRI center, to the doctor who's the radiologist? And I got to find out what's going on. I can't deal with this pain. So on a rainy day in November, they took me to the radiologist who had had 4 previous MRIs done over the last 10 years. And she put me in. Halfway through the MRI, she stopped it and she said, I don't know what you're complaining about. You're 80% improved. We can't understand how this has happened. What are you doing? And I began to tell her my connection with God and how I learned to do this technique called Einstellen. She said, don't tell me anymore. I'm afraid that they'll take my license away. And what I found out from her was California, because she was a foreign doctor from a foreign country, made her sign a piece of paper that said she couldn't do any divination, talk about prayer, or talk about God in healing. Otherwise, she would run the risk of losing her license. And that was the first time I ever learned that California made people sign that document if you were from out of state or from a foreign country and wanted to practice medicine in California. I began to realize the doctors there had a very hard time with the terms there is no incurable and God is the greatest physician. The doctors would not accept that. And I'd been kicked out of a hospital because of that term. There is no incurable. God is the greatest physician. And the only thing that will stop you from healing is your lack of belief in your divinity. You have to have faith in God, trust in a being that's stronger and better connected to get you to your messages and your helps to God, And then you have to believe in your own ability to heal. The doctors that I work with in this group are all doctors that believe God is the greatest physician and there is no incurable. But I was actually specifically sent back to teach this technique. So slowly over the years, I would begin to heal until a point 2 years before my mom's passing, an angel appeared in the room and said, "Now it is time to get ready to return to work. You're strong enough and you must write a book. And this book must be written by a certain time." I didn't know why, but I had the feeling it meant that my mom was going to be going home soon, and this book had to be written and completed before she returned home. And sure enough, by the time I got this book done, I was in the final editing, and my mom went home right before Christmas and just about 2 years ago. And my mom got to edit the book and the story about her coming to pick me up in the morgue with my dad and taking me home. And her final wish, because she learned to do Einstellen as well, was to die at home, not in the hospital, and to make sure that she got to see all of the family members before she returned home. Now, I have to go back and just tell a little story that when my dad had passed away, he had come back after he had died 3 days later and said, "I'll come back to pick up your mom when it's her time to go home. But there's a lot of people to meet, places to go, and things to see." And at one point, he actually wanted mom to leave and go home early. Mom said, "No, Herman," that's my dad's name, "it's not my time yet. I will go home soon, but not yet." So dad said to her, "Well, when it's your time, I'll come and get you and we'll go home together." So shortly after my mom's passing, 3 days later, mom came back and said, "No more grieving, no more guilt. Gotta go now." And she woke up the dog, who came running in to find out where grandma was because he heard grandma's voice. She woke me up. She took away all sense of grief, none left, just a little residual, like kind of overwhelm. But other than that, I felt immensely relaxed, taken care of, at ease. And for somebody who was supposed to be grieving, I wasn't. And at my mom's memorial service, the rabbi who was officiating said, "It's okay to grieve." And I said, "No, Rabbi, my mom gave me a wonderful gift. She took away all grief. If you want to grieve, that's fine. I'll give it to you, but I don't want to take it back. This is a gift unlike any other one." My mom knew that I was going to have to go through a lot of challenges after her passing. I mean, I had to sell the house 7 months later. The grief, so to speak, of letting go of the house after 25 years and the fact that mom had left would have been overwhelming. So it made it much easier. And I have to tell you, grief is one of the most difficult things to go with. It can hurt you severely. My mom knew that. And so her gift to me was no more grieving. Now, when my dad had gone home 12 years earlier, his gift to me was a sense of humor. And my little patients used to call me Dr. Silly. And my sense of humor was there, just like my dad. My dad had a sense of humor. So now I had gotten two gifts from my dad, a sense of humor, and my mom, no more grieving. And then an angel appeared later on that year and said, "You got to get out of California. You have to go to Florida. It's your turn now to help other people. You will now use this technique and help as many people as possible." Well, my editor for my book happened to live in Orlando, and she invited me 7 months afterwards, when the house had sold, to come and do teaching and lecturing about the book that she'd helped me edit. And I liked it in Orlando. And so I had come back a few months later. I traveled all around the world because the angel had appeared and said, shortly after, a year after your mom's passing, I would know where I'm going and what I'm doing. And that's when I knew I was going to go to Florida. And I picked up and I drove across country by myself, talking to God, and ended up in Orlando, Florida. I didn't know where I was going, didn't know what I was doing, didn't know where I was going to live. And I specifically was told I had to be there at a certain time in February. I didn't know why. Well, I put out an ad because doctors have furnished finders. That's where doctors and nurses can find a temporary living situation which usually it's about a 3-month stay someplace. Well, I tried to find a place to live, like buy a house or something like that. And within 2 hours of putting in that ad, a woman here in where I'm living now called me and said, "Hey, would you like to come? I'm a doctor of Oriental medicine and I have a practice. Would you like to share space here, have a place to live and a place to work?" And I said, "Sure." And I found this to be like one of my sisters, a spiritual sister, had found me, and I was here to help her. She was here to help me. And that's how my life has actually been run since my near-death experiences. God says, go here. I don't know why. I have to have faith, just trust and believe, and I do it. It's sometimes a little unnerving. Most people would have a hard time, but I know things, I see things, I hear things, I smell things. I can smell the angels when they're in the room. I'm able to determine what kind of angel they are, where they are, what they are, and who's they're in tow with. A lot of times people who've passed away come back and they want to leave me a message, and I can smell the angel. And for instance, one particular angel that I talk about in the story in the book came to visit. I said, "You're a new angel." And he said, "Yeah, normally this is not what I do. I'm only 2,000 years old of your earth years. I'm new on the job. The other angel got called away, and I have someone in tow, and they want to talk to you." And they began to talk to me. And I said, "Are you so and so's aunt that I've been praying for?" And she said, "Yes, thank you. The prayers helped me cross out of my body and get ready to go home." And she said, "Would you please tell my family I'm okay, I'm out of pain, but would you also continue to do prayers for my husband because he's drinking too much and I want to make sure that he's okay?" I said, "Okay." And then she left, the angel went with her, and this fragrance vanished in an instant. But at that time, my mom was still alive and she could actually smell the fragrance too. She knew an angel was in the room. 3 weeks later, the angel would reappear and tell me to stop praying for this man, that everything was okay. And lo and behold, that's when the daughter of this woman who passed away called me and said, "I understand you'd spoken to my mother. Have you really spoken to my mother? Are you some kind of charlatan or something?" And I said, "No." And I started to tell her about her mom. And she said, "How do you know this? Only our family would know this." I said, "Because she talked to me. She gave me this information to share with you." And so I wrote about that story in the book, There Are No Ones in Heaven. So those types of things happen along my path, especially since the second near-death experience. Now, since it's my job to teach Einstein, I do that every 2 weeks when I am online doing my own Zoom, but I'm working with my own clients and they are working with God. Since God is the greatest physician, they're God's patients, and they're only my clients since I'm only a little go-between. And it's my job to help guide and lead them to whatever they need to do or what options have to be provided for them. Alternative medicine and spiritual healing. Now, does everybody want to do what I have to offer? No, they don't. But about 1/5 will say, "This is too freaky for me. I can't deal with this. They're stuck in Western medicine," or "This is just too much. How do I know these things?" Can't tell you. It's just part of the gift. So they'll do their best and run away from me as far and as fast as possible. About 1/3 of them will have helps and healings. About 1/3 of the people I work with will live much longer. And about 1/3 of the people I work with, well, they'll go home in about 12 weeks. And that's just what it is. I'm here for those that are ready and willing to learn spiritual techniques and alternative medicine that can actually make a difference in their lives. Do they want to? That's up to them. But these days, I'm no longer a chiropractor. I'm no longer a medical examiner. I have all that background, but I don't do that anymore. I'm a licensed religious counselor, a doctor of theocentric counseling, a doctor of comparative religion, and I use those counseling techniques to help people heal. I teach them divine prayer. I teach them about Einstein, tuning into the source, asking for help and healing. I help them get rid of negative emotions that no longer serve them. I help them balance verbal frequencies for their own help and healing. and I do whatever else is necessary, such as pushing faint matter. Now, 100 years ago, a book was written called Healing Masters of the Far East. It was written by a man named Baird Spalding. And Baird talked about pushing energy. He had lived with monks in the country that was once called Burma, but it then became Myanmar. And one of my instructors actually came from there, and they taught me how to push this energy. Only they didn't call it pushing energy. The modern person that taught me how to do this, he called it pushing faint matter. And his name was Robert Harry Hover, and internal moving healing. He actually got a franchise from the Burmese monks to teach this in the United States. He used to work for Rockwell. He was on the program that reestablished the Apollo project after the Apollo disaster. And they remade Apollo 1 into what would become Apollo 8, so that it had better safety measures and more room, and that people could get out in the event of a disaster. So he had worked for them, and he was on vacation in what was then Burma, hurt himself, and the monks taught him this technique. So a month later, he went home with no signs of injury and began teaching. I was one of his last clients. He had about 400 clients before me, and said, "My goodness, you have more faint matter in you than almost everybody I've worked with, except one other woman." And he said, "I'm going to teach you how to do this. It's not going to be easy for you, but I did learn how to do it." But what was funny, I not only could do it for myself, I can push faint matter away from other people. I can see it, the evil things that are around people, and push it away. So I've learned a bunch of different things, and the angels have come down and they've taught me at least 36 things that I talk about in the book, things that I needed to know about. Don't get attached to people, places, times, or spaces. All things will change. Don't be the patient with the T. Learn to have patience with the C. Those kinds of things. That on the day of your birth, you're also given the day of your death, and that there really is no death. That what we as humans call death is just a transition from one life into another. And that it's like living from stage to stage. You're putting on this uniform you call a body. You hop on the stage, the curtain goes up, you live your life, the curtain goes down, you exit stage left. There's an area between one life and another that's in between lives. Then you put on your next body, you go up into the stage, and it all begins again. On infinitum, as long as God says you got to come back here. So why was I sent back? To help people. Most people don't know that they're on a schooling planet. This is the largest and most highly regarded schooling planet in the universe. God put all the evil on this planet. He took it from all over the universe, put it here, and said, "Okay, evil, it's your job to destroy these children of God. It's their job to master this reality, endure, persevere, and overcome as they become closer to me." This is their proving ground. You can call it college level or university level, and that's what this planet is. We have 52 races of beings that come to visit this world. We call them alien. They come here to learn about the dichotomy of good and evil. When this planet finally realizes what it is, and the people on it and humanity join together, then when this happens, then we won't have this dichotomy of good and evil here. And we too will travel to the stars and see other worlds less advanced than us. And they, as they go through their learning and evolve, we'll watch them go through this good and evil. But we will no longer destroy our planet anymore. But of the 52 races of beings that come to visit us, they call our world the zoo of the universe, because there's so many species here. And of those 52 races of beings, 3 races of beings come to visit us who are harmful. They work for the dark side. And 2 races of beings come here to help counter them. They work for the good side. It doesn't really matter who and what they are. Know that all the evil in the universe is put here, and your primary mission and purpose in life is to master this reality endure, persevere, and overcome it. And once you learn to know how to play the game of life, then you stop reacting to it. There are those in the parade of life, there's those in the grandstand watching the parade go by, and then there's the observers, those that stand back, watch it all go by, don't judge anybody, and keep doing what God sent you to do. People like me all have a mission and purpose in life. Everybody actually has a mission and purpose in life. Mine just happens to deal with help and healing, alternative medicine, spiritual healing. And I do many things for many people. I really can't go over it in a whole hour worth of time. You'd have to read the book. So if you go to that part of There Are No Lines in Heaven, go to chapter 5, where you can learn all about the different alternatives available.
Scott, you had said in the past that from the moment you were born that you knew you were different. And you had said something very specific that when you came into this world, that you had an awareness that you had just missed someone. In other words, someone had just left the planet before you came in. Do you mind elaborating on that? And do you have any ideas on who specifically that might have been?
Yes. I can elaborate. At age 5, I kept telling my mom, I know that I came into this world and just missed someone really important. Years later, I would have that near death experience and end up in the morgue. When I was on the other side, I met the being everybody calls Jesus. I also met Michael the Archangel. And I met a third being in the room who didn't tell me his name, but he said I would figure that out later. Well, it goes back to the same time my mom and dad saw somebody pushing my body into the morgue, to the refrigeration unit. And they saw somebody, they didn't know who it was. At that moment in time, when I came back in, I didn't know what they had seen. They would tell me this years later. But the biggest thing was I came home from a spiritual healing technique, learning about the different things that I needed to know and learning about Einstein. And my mom saw the man's face on the cover of this little pamphlet and she gasped and she said, "Oh my gosh, that's the guy. He's the man that was pushing your body into the morgue." Now, for the audience, I'm going to leave this as a cliffhanger. I'm not going to tell anybody who it is. You're going to have to ask me. And the reason is because it deals with learning how to do Einstein. It is the being that taught me how to do this and then share this with other people. Again, Einstein is Einsteellen, means tuning into the source and asking for help and healing. It's actually an ancient technique that humans once, long time ago, knew how to do. Plants and animals didn't forget, but they do it naturally, but humans have forgotten. With that, this special being was watching over me. He was a human, as human as everybody else. He went home 2 months after I was born, but I knew it as a little kid. I was different, and I had just missed somebody tremendously important. And that is about knowing the who you are and why you're here, your mission and purpose in life. And I started to tell my mom and dad as a little boy, oh, there's going to be a Great Depression greater than when you grew up, greater than what you lived in. And there's going to be massive wars, and there's going to be all sorts of things going on, but it'll all turn out. And the world will end up being a better place. And my mom and dad and my grandmother thought, oh my gosh, this kid, there's something wrong with this kid. He's weird. And I learned to use the word weird, which means spiritually unique or different, as I was growing up, because I was a outcast, so to speak. I was a loner. I wasn't with the rest of the kids. I was terrible at sports. I mean, the sports that I was good at were horseback riding, sailing, and flying airplanes when I was 15 years old. And then most of the kids, I mean, basketball, baseball, football, I wasn't good at any of those things. Although I did play hockey and soccer, but I was a goaltender. But I knew I was different. And anybody who wants to be a hockey goaltender or a soccer goaltender, I mean, you got to know they're different people. So I was unique in that realm, and I knew how to bet on games and who was going to win, even if I couldn't bet myself. So I knew that when I was feeling this way, that I was different and I had a different mission and purpose in life. People weren't going to take too kindly to that because I didn't fit into the normal mold of people, of things to do. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to help people heal, but I wasn't into the standard way of doing things. I went and became a chiropractor because it was a chiropractor that helped me. I liked how they did things. I didn't like drugs. I didn't like pain medicine. I didn't like how to do things. The only time I ever went to the doctor is when I broke something and I had to be in a cast. But I didn't find it being cool. I just had to go back to healing myself and then go on with life. I was more of a brainiac. I was a nerdy kid. I mean, my idea of fun was to take a math problem at the end and go backwards in time and space and create the question that resulted in the answer that originally was given to me. I mean, that was my idea of fun. Math quizzes, you know, that was me.
You don't wanna be arrogant, but I think it's, probably a good thing to be intelligent, right? Like, they say if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So I could see what you mean where it's like, sometimes it's just satisfying to, like, solve a math problem, or in your experience, reverse engineering them and just really just keeping your brain sharp. So there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's fantastic. You had said that you had an agreement with the creator. Now, was that an agreement to come into this world regarding like your life and your body? And do we all make an agreement to come here? Is that how that
Yes. And I have to tell you, it's not necessarily a karmic agreement. There is no such thing as karma per se. We're not here to suffer, but we are here to struggle like a butterfly. Well, a pupa becoming a caterpillar, becoming a pupa, becoming a butterfly. If you cut the cocoon open, the caterpillar will die. So just this human, in order to become this divine butterfly of a human being, you have to go through struggles. And you do make agreements with the creator. And in this particular case, I was to go back to this world and finish up where I could not finish off with about 48 different people. My parents were an example. I knew that my parents were once my children. They'd also been my parents in a previous lifetime. And I was to come back and finish what I could not finish in a previous lifetime. In that lifetime, I worked with Maria Theresa, Empress of Austria-Hungary. And I was a doctor. I was Jewish in that life. And she didn't like Jews, but I was kept so that I could be doing things quietly that she could discount. Like the CIA talks about, we deny it didn't exist. And in one of those particular lifetimes, in that particular life in the 1750s, Maria Theresa sent me on loan to the Russians and the Prussians. It was what empires and kings and queens and empresses would do is they would share physicians with one another. They would send gifts to one another, make the peace. But I was also there to see what was going on in these different places. And what had happened was there was an incident within the Austro-Hungarian Empire where there was an episode of incest, and a young girl who was a member of the royal family had gotten pregnant. They did not want to credit, they wanted to deny, I'll say, what had transpired because the other person that caused the pregnancy was another member of the royal family. So they wanted to wipe the slate clean, push it under the rug. I said, well, this young lady is only 16 and she just had babies. She had twins. I would like to adopt these kids. I don't want them to be put in an orphanage. So they said, you can't do that. You have to marry this young lady, and they'll claim whatever reason they made me marry her. They put her into a monastery, claiming that after a childbirth that she had gone crazy. She didn't. She just it was traumatized. And then I took care of these two children. These became my kids, and they would be eventually in the next life my parents. But what had happened was I was off taking care of errands for the queen, the empress, and my kids decided to get in a little boat. And even though it was April and getting spring, there was still ice on the river, the Danube, and they went across the river and the boat flipped over. They fell in, they survived, but they ended up with pneumonia. And here was their father was a physician. By the time I got back, they had died of pneumonia. I couldn't help them. So in this life, I had made an agreement to come back and help all the people that I could not help in previous lifetimes. And they told me on the other side that I would be helping 38 different people in the form of a contract, an agreement with God and the other souls to finish what I could not finish. It wasn't karma, for I was to do this not out of necessity, but out of love. The contract was about fulfilling a promise with love. What they told me was never make a promise you cannot keep. Well, since I couldn't keep that promise, I had to keep the promise in this lifetime. So in that lifetime, they were my kids. I couldn't come back and help them. So in this lifetime, I came back to take care of them. And I took care of both my mother and my father in the final years of their life.
My understanding is that you believe that we are reincarnating. Is there a reason for this, and is there a reason that we don't remember our past lives?
Couple of reasons you don't remember. Sometimes it's done on purpose. You can't remember because they won't let you. Number two, if you're playing the part of the villain, you don't want to remember that you're actually playing the part of the villain, and therefore that would kind of screw up the game. If your best friend on the other side volunteers to be your worst enemy here on Earth, well, then they can't remember. Because if they did, they'd stop being your enemy. Other reasons we don't remember is simply because we have forgotten our divine connection to the source. Once you start to remember who we are and why we're here, your mission and purpose in life, then that memory comes back. But the other side told me, for instance, I couldn't remember all of my past lifetimes. I would only be allowed to remember the 38 lifetimes that had something to do with my current reality. That's all they would let me see because it would interfere with my ability to get my job done to pay back what it was I had to do out of love. All my spiritual sisters, my mom and dad, all those things, I couldn't pay them back if I had all these other things going on. Now, for instance, they tell me from the other side that when I'm up there, I'm in the library of God all the time, reading books between lifetimes so that I could see what was going on into the future. And they said, you're reading books that you don't need to read. It's not going to happen for some time yet. And I said, but it's a lot of fun to read that there is a future. Life will go on. No matter what humanity does to the earth, God will help us stay alive. The earth will not be destroyed. The earth will continue to spin. God will hold his hand underneath it, and it still will be a schooling planet, the toughest schooling planet out there, the University of God. But all the beings in the universe, good and bad, will come here when they get to this level because they were striving to experience life, good, bad, and ugly here on this world. So, will you learn things? Yes. Will you volunteer to come here? Yes. Will God ask you to come here sometimes when you don't want to leave the comfort of home in heaven? Yes. I mean, hey, it was disappointing. I got to go back. That world, those mean people, those nasty people want to just kill you. Evil's pretty bad down there. Yeah, well, you got to go. We got a job for you, and it's only you can fulfill this. And if you don't go back, I mean, it's not like they forced me on the other side to go back. They said if you don't go back, a lot of people will miss their connections, that you're a connector of souls. So I said, okay. And that's when I tapped my right hand into my left hand. I'll go back. You know, grudgingly, I would go back. But the biggest thing is once you realize why you're here, you don't live life from fear. So I teach people how to get rid of fear, how to get rid of overwhelm, how to learn to forgive yourself and other people. The angels have told me two things happen. Humans make a mistake, And then they beat themselves up because of the first mistake and they cause themselves harm. They said, we don't need to harm you or punish you. You do all that on your own. So, number one, when you make a mistake, forgive yourself. So, I teach people special techniques on forgiving yourself and other people. And if you knew the truth that most of your so called enemies in this life are actually your best friends on the other side, then you want to stop fighting with them. Now, here's the one caveat: some people aren't. Some people have chosen to work for the dark side, evil. You don't want to play with those people. You don't want to have anything to do with them. You don't have to forgive them, but you will. But you can't bless those folks. Those folks are unblessable. You can't bless evil. Your job is to only do it for the people who can't remember that they're divine children of God and they're playing a part in this game of life. So, part of your answers are in those particular realms. There are other reasons why you forget, but for the most part, I've covered the two major reasons why you forget, unless you actually do it on purpose because you don't want to go back there.
The only reason I've ever come up with is that, and maybe it wasn't even me who thought of this, but the idea of tying up loose ends from previous lives, right? It would
That's
get to a point where how could you focus on this one because you still have like 45 families from, right?
Yes, well,
So
that's the whole thing. I'm coming back to complete those things that I could not do in 38 previous lifetimes. And I know them. And I know my spiritual brothers and sisters when I meet them. That all comes from one major lifetime. Not all of them, as you heard about the time in Austria, but I had one particular lifetime experience that I'm aware of where I was the fifth son of a mufti in the Kingdom of Granada between 1285 and 1313, when the Roman Catholics of Spain were pushing out the Muslim Moors and pushing them back into what is now Morocco, but Northern Africa. My father was Muslim. I had six mothers and 42 sisters, all the concubines and everybody else. My father and my four brothers had been killed in battle. I was the youngest one, and there was a vizier who took over until my 18th birthday, where when I was going to take over, could have been 17th birthday, but then they kind of co-ruled with me. And on one of these days, I went out on a hunting trip and I had my hawk with me. I had a hawk that was always on my left arm. I love birds. And this bird was my hunting bird. And the bird would go catch rabbits and stuff I would bring back. But suddenly that day, my sister, who was my protector, which was unusual in an Islamic world, she would come with me. She was older. She was actually one of the Mufti's wives. She was the daughter of one of the wives, and she would watch over me. She had come from another place in Europe, and therefore she had learned to hunt, and she was well versed in bow and arrow. That day, she didn't come with me, and someone else did. And I suddenly got an arrow to the back, and I never made it to my 18th birthday. In this particular life, that same person was a business manager. And before he got me, I got him. And that's how things work. I finished it up. But in reality, on the other side, he didn't remember who he was. And so he was just being himself. If he had remembered who he was, he wouldn't have done what he did to me and caused me harm. And in this particular case, I fired him before he could cause me an issue. When you realize that many people come here and purposely turn off their memories so they could play the game, then it's much easier to forgive another soul and forgive yourself for playing the game. And what you think was a mistake wasn't a mistake at all. And one of the biggest, hardest things was I thought I made several mistakes which caused massive problems for me. And then I became ill. And then if I had known these things, I would have forgiven myself much earlier. When I learned I could now forgive myself and other people, healing began to occur rapidly. Then I would do Einstein and I would learn all these alternative medical practices. and add them to the spiritual practices of help and healing. Is Einstein the only method? No, it's just one of my favorites because it helped me heal quickly. TM and I didn't get along. That's transcendental meditation. Going out in nature, that's a way to heal. Any form of meditation is an option. And all these other ancient techniques that people have forgotten, like pushing faint matter and verbal numbers and all these things, they're all options. But I will never share a method with a patient or a client that I haven't tried myself. And I do more than just try it. I prove it to myself. Does this work or not? Because I spent a lot of time and money investigating all of them. I spent over $308,000 of my own money and ended up going bankrupt testing all of these things. Do they work or don't they work? And I found that 90% of them were a waste of time, money, and energy. So I only talk about the things that worked for me. Now, are there still other alternatives available out there that I haven't investigated? Sure. But I won't recommend them to anybody till I get to experience them myself. I'm my best guinea pig. I test it on me. Your body is supposed to be used as a tool anyway. So I use it as a tool. It's meant to be. So I won't give anything to anybody or recommend anything to anybody unless I've tried it on myself. And I always give myself 90 to 120 days before I either say it made it or it failed. I'm not here for the money. I'm not here for the ego or greed. Now, yes, I have to be paid for what I do simply because that's how I make my living these days, right? But at the same time, I'm not into all these, well, you got to make money and you got to do it this way and you got to have it this way. And how many medical doctors out there has a patient gone to and asked the doctor, have they ever taken the medicine they've recommended them? Now, Dave, do you know? Have you ever asked your doctor, does he take or has he taken the medication he recommended to you?
I have never asked, but I do know they get a typically my understanding is they get a kickback and I'm one I don't really like to even take the over the counter pain medicine, so that's kind of where I'm at with that
I,
stuff.
when I've had teeth extracted because I've had damage to the teeth and they had to be pulled out, the dentist said, "Oh my gosh, you don't want to take pain med? No, I'll do acupuncture, I'll do Einstein, I'll do some verbal numbers, and I'll even push some faint matter, but I'm not going to take the medicine to numb my face." And they're like, "What?" Yeah. And the doctor gets so nervous around me. I'm going to drill on this tooth. That's okay. Do it. All right. But once you start to do this, you'll realize, especially Einstein, you will stop being afraid of pain. Pushing faint matter actually helped break it completely. When I learned I could push the pain out of my body, I stopped being afraid of the pain. And when I stopped being afraid of the pain, life changed. I fell down last year and I broke my hand. I hit a step. And so I hit my pinky finger. And I looked at that and I was like, oh, wow, it looks like the bone's out of my hand. And I went home. I sat down quietly and calmly, did Einstein, wrapped my hand, and I went to the urgent care. They said, oh, we'll put this in a cast. So I put it in a cast, and it was supposed to take 12 weeks to heal. Instead, by 4 weeks, they had taken the cast off because it had been completely healed. I can make a fist. I wouldn't want to hit anybody with this fist. I wouldn't want to punch anything. But the fact is, a woman who had had a similar fracture at the same time I was going in, 12 weeks later, she was still wearing her cast. It hadn't healed yet. God can't stop you from having bad things happen to you, but you can heal rapidly once you learn these simple techniques to heal yourself. So that's one of those major techniques. Einstein, pushing faint matter, doing verbal numbers, prayer, all these things can help. And I'm here to help people do that. Learn simple techniques to heal themselves.
It's kind of like you said prior, you said, so as you believe you can achieve. And so I feel like I can tell you're very genuine in your message and, you want to provide people potentially safer ways to do things. I'm just learning about this for the first time now. You have briefly touched upon like four things that I want to ask you questions for. So I hope you don't mind kind of calling back to a few of those.
Yeah, and I'll go into greater depth and detail on some of the things that maybe I didn't cover at that moment.
Oh, it is all good, my friend. Where the hell was I?
And hopefully not in hell. You don't want to make yourself suffer. Remember, it's only struggle, not suffer.
That is true. Well, it's interesting. There's a lesson to be learned in all the negative things, right? Some people I feel like dwell on the bad things that happen to them, but after you experience these things, you learn from it, you learn how to avoid it better, and it's almost like there's a good woven into the bad, right? Like if you could like
Yeah.
come out of the other side of it.
You learn from the lessons provided from you, the tests given to you from the other side. So you don't look at anything as bad or good. It's just a test, which brings me to a very important point, which you will eventually cover. Number one, never commit suicide if you can help it, unless you're pre-programmed to do so. And the second thing is never hate another soul, another person, place, time, or space, because anything you hate will give you instant karma to come back as the thing you once hated. That's true karma. So, biggest thing, if you don't have to commit suicide, you can choose better. Why? Because you'll have to hang around till it was supposed to be your exit date. Remember, the day of your birth, you're given the date of your exit. So let's say you have until your 88th birthday and you commit suicide at age 50. You're still going to have to hang around without a body till you're the next 28 years or 38 years, 38 years. What happens to you? Evil can do what it wants with you. It can torment the heck out of you, whether you're on the moon or on the earth. The biggest thing is don't do those things. Now, there are some people that I've worked with that their soul chose to commit suicide, but it was pre-programmed. And I remember there's a mother who wrote a story of her son. He was given three options. One was die a horrible death in like being killed in war. The other one was die from a horrible death in disease, or to commit suicide and end it early, but give a message to his mother that everything would work out fine. So in this particular case, and it's not one, I've run across a couple of people who actually pre-programmed the option to do suicide.
If there was one thing that was potentially forbidden, I feel like suicide would be the one thing that is like forbidden. I could potentially see that happening. So that kind of brings me into the question of this whole idea of good versus evil changes and kind of it's malleable by like the time frame of society. Things change all the time. We have this idea of sins and good and evil. Do you think there are certain actions such as suicide or other things that are legitimately
Murder
forbidden?
and suicide are very similar. God gave you this body as a gift. God doesn't want you to hurt it in any way, shape, and form. Since it's a gift from God, by killing yourself, suicide, it's like murdering yourself. So you don't want to do that. Same as you don't want to do that. But what happens if you did kill someone in war or a battle or a fight, right? You have to pay it back. Here's a very interesting thing. Many people say, well, if I can help myself heal, then how do I explain that I had a hernia or I had a disc injury or I had some kind of thing happen to me? Have you ever thought, if you're really here to complete stuff, that maybe the person who caused you harm in a previous life is now a doctor in this life, and when they caused you harm in that life, they have to pay you back by helping you heal in this life? Okay. Another thing, well, maybe I hurt someone else. Well, now maybe in that life I was a soldier, and in this life I'm a doctor, and it's my job to help that person heal in this realm. So we go back and forth. We killed someone in one life. We have to help that same soul heal in the next life, or whenever that time frame is. So if you're actually here just to complete what you didn't finish in previous lifetimes, then ultimately, when you're all done doing this, you may not need to return to this reality. See, there's multiple realities, multiple universes going on simultaneously, on infinitum. How many? I don't know. Goes from however God said so till the game is done. The game of life and how to play it was Florence Scovel Shinn. All right, one of the first women into spirituality and healing back in 1923. That's a wonderful book to start the spiritual path. Which way do I have to go? What is my spiritual path? What questions do I need to ask? Here's another thing. Angels told me, ask better questions and you'll get better answers. So my first question was, what should I ask first? And they started to tell me, you need to all wake up. Can you? No. 70% of the population of this earth can't wake up if they tried. It's not built into who they are. Their human design says they're not going to wake up in this life. All right, 30% could wake up, but of the 30%, 28% still won't wake up. They think they are. They think they're becoming more aware and getting closer to God, but only in reality, 2%, just 2% are going to wake up in any given lifetime and realize who they are and why they're here. Now, we're coming to a major turning point in reality. Is humanity going to destroy itself again? The angels had told me humanity had destroyed itself 4 previous times in 4 different cycles. The angels were getting kind of tired of it. Are we as humans, as a group of beings, are we going to destroy ourselves a 5th time? Are we going to learn? Will God stop it from happening where we don't blow ourselves up, don't nuke ourselves to death, or don't cause ourselves to die from an illness that we created, biological warfare? Are we going to stop ourselves? Is God going to help us bring us to our knees to finally realize we got to wake up, smell the divine roses in time and space? I don't know. It's all up to how we think, how we believe. We must have faith in God, trust in a being higher than us, smarter and stronger to connect us to God, because we've forgotten how to do that, and in our own divinity. Believe in our own divine soul that we are children of God. Are we going to do that? Or are we going to keep repeating this over and over again? Thank goodness God put a ring around this planet to prevent it from being destroyed. He had an angel come down and do that and made the big difference. But are we going to choose a different path? Are we going to be in the parade of life? Are we going to watch the parade of life in the grandstands? Are we going to keep observing it far back from everybody and say, no, I'm not going to take that path. I'm not going to accept that anymore. Remember when I see all these people in Israel and Palestine, people killing each other and seeing the children that suffer. Remember, these souls actually chose this path. They wanted to come into this reality. I know that's a tough thing to understand.
If we're coming here, making mistakes, coming back, fixing them, learning as we go, as human beings haven't always existed, of course, now, at least on the grand scale of time. But even right now, for example, how do you think this works for animals? What are animals here to learn? And
We they're here to support us in the process of our life. They're here for many different reasons. But for instance, dogs and cats, will take them. Many of these animals are here to help take away pain and suffering from us. They take it upon themselves. Horses too. And as a result, they don't have as long a lifespan because they take on our burdens. Our burdens are things we picked up and carry from lifetime to lifetime. But I got to tell you, stop carrying burdens from lifetime to lifetime. That's what people call karma. Stop it. How do you do that? You got to give those away to a being higher than us, stronger than us, whatever you call that being. Animals, though, choose to do this. Do they, like some people say, well, we reincarnate back as an animal? No. Humans really will reincarnate back as humans. Animals will reincarnate back as animals. Each faith has its own belief system. You do come into a particular faith that you're born into for a particular lesson that you have to learn, whether you're Jewish or Christian or Buddhist or Hindu or Muslim. That's why the book is called There Are No Lines in Heaven, because everybody's welcome in heaven. And the angels laugh. On the back of the book, it says, there are no lines in heaven when you reach the pearly gates. No Christians in the center, Jews to the left, Muslims to the right, for you are all children of God and you're all welcome. And the angel went on to laugh as he was telling me this, that you humans just don't get it. You're all part of the same children of God. What are these animals doing? Taking away negative energy. They're providing a natural environment. This environment had trees, green grass, water. And so there was a lot of animals. Remember, I told you this is the zoo of life, the zoo of the universe. 52 races of beings from other worlds come to this world and this reality, time and space. to see the dichotomy of good and evil. And that includes all the other species of beings here, from butterflies to bees to birds to what was in a previous thing of dinosaurs. But we have present day dinosaurs too. Animals serve their purpose in God's realm. What each animal is, ask the animal. Like Dr. Doolittle, I talk to animals and they tell me what their jobs are, what their missions and purposes are. And a lot of the animals know it much better than we do. They know how to pull down and do Einstein and bring down this healing energy of God. We don't. But now it's my job to help remind people you can remember and wake up. Will everybody wake up? No. But if we got 30% of the world to wake up, it would dramatically change overnight. And the other 70% wouldn't realize what just has transpired. I mean, people have said, is there an exact planet just like this, a mirrored planet somewhere else in the solar system? Maybe. And maybe when their time comes, if certain souls refuse to change, they'll stay on one planet. We'll continue on to a different reality where it's slightly different. Oh, only time will change and time will know. We'll see. And how do you make sure you get there? Think positively. The positive power of belief, the biology of belief, Bruce Lipton's work, right? Think positive, you shall be positive. But if you think negative, you might go down a wrong rabbit hole and get stuck and go to a different reality.
So when you bring up the dinosaurs no longer exist. So where do you think their soul goes? You think their soul never reincarnates again because the
No, they would have come back as something else. And for instance, we know today that many raptors that were in the past are the ancestors of present day birds. Chances are they're the what used to be there. Some of the smarter animals will probably come back as more predator beings that are here. But since animals have a tendency to reincarnate as animals, and people have a tendency to reincarnate as people, there must be a special reason if you decided you wanted to come back as an animal, but why? This is the top life form on the planet. On the planet. I'm not saying the top life form.
you think it goes up, like elevates in levels, maybe you kind of work your way up the system,
Hey,
so to speak?
hey, same thing in spirit form. You work your way up, get higher and higher. So every time you come back, you hopefully are learning something from each of these excursions, being human, and come back and hopefully your spirit grows more and more. So I like to use the word the sea of soul. We come from the sea of soul and we get put in a little bottle and we come, that's our body. And then we experience life and then we come back into the sea of soul and share that with the other souls that are in the sea of soul, which makes up the kingdom of God. That's, all the parts that make up God. And that part you can see and that part that you can't. And then we share that. And it sort of gets disseminated throughout the whole sea of soul. People kept saying to me, everybody should come in with a guidebook on how to live your life. And actually, you do. You just forget it. It's automated. And if you know how to access that in the body brain connection, you will access this storage information of the game of life and how to play it. And this is important.
Whatever it is, it's beautiful. It's chaotic, it's not always perfect, but it is fascinating and beautiful, just to look outside, see the birds flying. I know you said that in a previous life that you were a huge fan of birds. Is that still true?
Yeah, I like birds. If you go back to one of the earliest videos I did with a friend from Montreal, Canada, on that video, you'll see me holding on to Logan. He's a showbird. And I first learned how to work with birds, raptors, with Logan. He was a very gentle bird for a raptor. He had 327 pounds per square inch of squeezing. I mean, he could break your wrist holding on you.
Damn.
But he had a different form of love. As long as you fed him, he loved coming to you. And you'll see Logan in that picture. And I was on the cliffs in La Jolla Shores. And Logan is a bird that they use in the movies. And you'll see him. This wonderful bird to learn how to be a raptor person and have the raptor experience, not being afraid of animals, especially birds, how to command and control. They're not exactly the easiest bird to command and control. Sometimes they do what they want. They'll go off looking for food. playing with other birds, and they'll come back when they want to. But as long as you had food, Logan would find you and he'd come back to you. It was such a cool experience. So I
Yeah.
love birds. I love horses. I love dolphins and whales. Whales are the record keepers of the planet. And elephants and whales, they said they are related in their bone structure. They probably were similar beings in previous lifetimes and especially in ancient days. So I love elephants. And of course, some of my other favorite animals, bears, and I love tigers. There's something about a tiger. I can't explain it. There's just something about it. On the other side, you'll go to heaven and you will have, as they say, a mansion in heaven, but you'll also have all the other animals that you want to play with on the other side. And animals that could be seriously dangerous on this side, you could be with. And something about it was a memory of a tiger, and I just love tigers. And their fur is just something unexplainable. The same as every angel has a particular fragrance, every animal has a particular feel to them, and their energy is so unique to them and their species.
I actually love birds as well. And since you love tigers so much, I want to show you something. You're going to like this. I don't know if this is a tiger or like it's supposed to be like a saber-toothed tiger or something like this.
Now it looks more like a modern tiger, and although its head and eyes are probably not matched, it's probably from Indonesia the way it's carved, or some islands in the Indian Ocean, or that area, because the Sumatran tigers are smaller and they sort of look like that. They're not like the Bengal tigers or the Chinese tigers. They have a different look. The Indian tigers, the Chinese tigers have a different way. Sumatran tigers and those in Bali have a different style. They're smaller and have sort of like this pattern that you're looking at.
Wow, so you know so much more about I could barely tell the difference between a tiger and a lion. You're like surgical with it, huh?
I like tigers. I like cats and dogs. Just so you know, I grew up with 5 cats, 2 dogs, and a hamster and a horse. I grew up with lots of animals. I love animals. And being that I was mostly a loner growing up, I had a lot of animals to play with. And hey, who needs humans when I got animals? Most of them, they gave unconditional love. I had German shepherds. I had one dog that Azi means Chazak is as short as Azi is short for Chazak, which means lightning. He is he was part wolf and part German Shepherd, and he was gorgeous. He stood 5'2" tall on his hind legs when he'd step up, put his paws on top of me, and he was like part wolf, part bear. But he could be dangerous. He had 2-inch fangs, upper and lowers, and don't mess with him. Also, don't mess with the family because he was extremely protective. He got hit by a car in a winter storm. That's what saved him. The car was going uphill. He tried to fight with the old Rambler, got run over. All he did is get a scratch in his head. Other than that, he never fought with a car again. But he was being protective, thinking he was trying to protect us from going out in the street as kids. This animal was so strong. My brother fell down one day and he was chasing another dog or a cat, and he dragged my brother down the street. And my brother couldn't get up. He was stuck. His hand was stuck with the leash. He couldn't get loose. And this dog just dragged him everywhere. He was a good sled dog. So we've had little dogs who think they're big. A Chiweenie named Lucky, who doesn't bark. He actually talked to you. And he was named Lucky because he got into all sorts of trouble and was lucky to be alive, from protected from being executed by electrocution, or jumping off of a roof and sliding down and flying off the roof and landing on the only thing that was there was a couch, and he bounced off of it, 4 paws, landed on the ground like a cat. So I've had a little Hampy the hamster. We've had all sorts of animals, birds, parakeets, and of course my favorite, my horses. Crazy Legs was an 18 hands high animal who used to cross his back legs. He was the most gentle of animals. I won my only blue ribbon on Crazy Legs. And then Toy Commander, my jumping champion, Commander. He was Canadian Grand National Champion. I love these guys. I mean, I would fight with them because they try to push me around and say, hey, I'm the boss. But when I needed a horse to jump, he was the horse to go with. My last horseback competition was at the university, no, it was the Army Academy, all in the East Coast stuff. It was Stony Brook, Long Island University, University of Connecticut, uh, New Jersey Institute of Technology, Rutgers, all those schools. And we'd have International Horse Show Association that we used to compete with. And the last one was at the Army Academy in West Point. I love big animals. And sometimes the bigger the animal, the more gentle they are. You know, like the Clydesdale, the Frisians, all these big animals, these workhorses are just usual gentle giants. I just love being around them.
Do
If
you
I could
think
get in the water with the whales, I could. I mean, the closest I came was in Mexico when I was in the Sea of Cortez, and we pulled up a panga, and a mother whale with her baby pushed the baby up next to the panga. You're not really supposed to get close, but the mother pushed the baby up and looked at us out of one eye, and her eye was bigger than me. And she was showing the baby what humans were like. And it was just awesome. It was amazing.
it's kind of interesting, even with bigger dogs, you'll see this. It's almost like if you take a big dog and they're around like an infant or a small child, like you could tell they're almost instinctually being gentle, like so as to not hurt the smaller, person. But yeah, super interesting.
Now, you talked about reincarnation and karma and stuff like that. Right after our dog Ozzy, the German Shepherd, passed away, we moved to California from New Jersey. We were there a couple of years, and animals reincarnate faster than human beings do. And I showed up at the house of one of our friends who were Indian doctors. They were from India, and they had come and they practiced. They were MDs, and their last names were Chopra, like Deepak Chopra, but they weren't related. And the young lady was a woman doctor, and she was stunning. She could have been a model, but she chose to be an MD, and she was into nutrition and alternative. And it was her mother, Moni, that had actually invited me to come and meet them and sit down and talk about reincarnation. We walk in the door, and there's a dog barking. And lo and behold, this big, gorgeous German Shepherd comes up to my mom and dad and starts to cry and whine. And it was as though he was the reincarnation of Ozzy Dog. And that dog would not leave my mom and dad alone for the whole 4 hours that we were there. It's almost like, hey, I haven't seen you in a lifetime, literally, and I'm going to be there with you. And even the owners said, we've never seen him do this before to anybody. And I said, all of us said, we swear that this is the reincarnation of our dog. And then when we got up to go walk out, it was midnight. We'd been there for hours. And the dog looked at my mom and dad and went, oh, and put his tail up and turned his head and walked away into the other room like, I'm done and I'm out of here. If you're leaving, I'm out of here too. And he went back to be who he was in that lifetime. But we got to finish up with Ozzy. It was amazing. My mom and dad and I all looked at each other as we walked out and go, that was Ozzy. He came back to finish up what he couldn't finish up with us. And he too has moved on.
I feel like human beings have these instincts as well, but maybe the way that we live is kind of detaching us from these instincts, right? Like
The more technological we get involved, the less attached to nature, and we've lost these things. And so when I teach Einstein to people, not only helps them heal, but gives them divine insight to help them reconnect to nature, because God is nature and nature is God. And once you start going out in nature and hugging a tree, you'll be better connected to the source of all that is, to be free, who we really are, children of God.
if you could ask one question to the person watching this video right now, what would it be?
If I'm asking a stranger who's watching this video, what would it be? Would
Yes.
you like to master this reality? And would you like to heal yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually? Or would you like to get closer to God and complete your mission and purpose in life, which requires you know what your mission and purpose in life is? So any of those three things would be good things to ask. Do you know who you are? Do you know why you're here? Do you know how to help yourself heal? And do you know what to do about it?
But if you could give a piece of advice to someone that might have existential questions, they're on their spiritual journey, things like this, those that listen to near death experiencers kind of in the search for more answers, is there any advice that you could give to kind of comfort them on this journey?
Number one, remain calm with your experience here on life. God and the creator, the one, the all, the everything, the big guy, it can't get through to you unless you remain calm. Ask for divine inspiration and guidance every day. Learn how to reconnect, whether you call it prayer or Einstein or meditation. Do those things so you can reconnect to the divine and figure out why you're here and what you must do. Now, everybody's reason. You must master this reality, endure, persevere, and overcome. And how you do that and what you call yourself is a matter of your filters and your interpretation in this life. Learn as much as you can. There's tons of books to read. There's experiences, actually what you're really here for. Your body is a tool. Use it to experience life, but do it with joy. Some things will be good, some things not so good, but don't get caught up on the bad stuff. Forgive yourself and move on. Forgive others and move on. And know that they're playing a game too in the game of life. There's those that are awake and those that are not. Those people, some of them can't wake up. So you can hit them in the head. It won't make a difference. They're not going to wake up. You could talk till your face turns blue. They're not going to see God, believe in God, or understand God. They're stuck in this reality, ego and greed. Don't get caught up in the ego and greed. You're here for another purpose and another mission. Learn what that is. How do you do it? Ask questions from people like me. I not only help people learn to heal, but a lot of my clients are fellow healers who need other healers who've gone before them, like a pathfinder. I'm a pathfinder. I've gone through it, this experience. I teach people how to make a shortcut out of it. So learn. So people either hire me to be a client or they ask me, can you teach me how to heal myself? Or they want to know, can they heal? Are they able to stay on this planet and live longer? All of the above. So with that, people will go to my website, https:// there are no lines in heaven.com. Again, there are no lines in heaven.com. It's also the name of my book. My email address is there. My telephone number is there. Oh my gosh, I give everybody my phone number. You want to text me? You want to call me? You want to WhatsApp with me? We'll do that. You want a session? Fantastic. We'll book a session and we'll talk about for the next 90 minutes how to do that. Yes, I will be paid for that. I get paid handsomely for that. Are there times where I'll give things away? You betcha. I will teach anybody how to do Einstein about once every 2 weeks, twice a month. I teach Einstein for free because God tells me I have to do it for free, and I will do it on a Zoom. So if you're watching this video and you don't have enough money to hire me as either to be a client or a patient, then you want to join us to learn how to do Einstein. The one thing God sent me back to earth to teach, how to reconnect to the source. And then, of course, if you want to hire me, people have hired me to come do lectures, alternative medicine, spiritual healing, down in Costa Rica, colleges and universities. I talk about DEI versus DIE, diversity, equity, and inclusion for the university folks. Doesn't matter. You want to go to college. It doesn't matter if you're black, you're white, Hispanic, Asian. It doesn't matter because there are no lines in heaven. The same thing applies to this earth. There is no prejudice in heaven. Why? There shouldn't be any prejudice on earth either. But since we live on an evil planet, all created for our ability to grow and become who we are, children of God, then you have to learn not to be prejudiced or filled with hate for anybody. Like I said, whether it's Israel and Palestine, Russia, Ukraine, Chinese, Taipei, Taiwan, Hong Kong. Makes no difference. Stop hating one another. We're all children of God. It doesn't matter what we look like. These are simply tools. They are the clothing of the experience we need to go through. So sometimes we're black, sometimes we're white, sometimes we're a man, sometimes we're a woman, sometimes we're Asian, sometimes Hispanic, sometimes we're Jewish, sometimes we're Christian, sometimes Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever. You're going through this life and experience it to the fullest. Enjoy this reality. And that means learning to be who you really are and why you're really here. An atheist is not going to watch this presentation unless somebody gave them a bad diagnosis, a poor prognosis. Then they're looking for answers very quickly. And only then will I work with people like that. Most people won't ever pay attention to who I am unless they need me. And hopefully you'll never need me. But for those that do, I'm here. Again, I'm Dr. Scott Robinson. I am talking about There Are No Lines in Heaven. I'm here with my host, Dave, the Wonderkin from Connecticut. And I thank you for the little slice in time. God bless, be well, and good journeys.
Thank you so much, Dr. Scott Robinson, for coming on. And to everyone watching, thank you so much for your sliver of time. This has been ours. It's been an absolute pleasure, man. So we'll keep in touch, and who knows, maybe we could do it again. Um,
And if you ever want to learn Einstein, I'll put you on my mailing list and you'll come and learn to do Einstein.
okay, that's, maybe that's something we could explore. We'll figure it out. Thank you so much again, and can't wait to do it again soon.
God bless you. Take care.
Peace out. Shit. Hey, I don't know if you could hear me, but you froze up, buddy. Ah, shit.